It is a pleasure to introduce you to Gerald Celente, founder and director of the Trends Research Institute. Mr. Celente is one of the world's most respected economic and social trends experts. He's the author of Trends 2000, Trend Tracking, that's published by Warner Books, and publisher of the Trends Journal. Mr. Celente and his team are at trendsresearch.com. You'll see Mr. Celente on all the major news networks and in newspapers regularly. Mr. Celente, good to meet you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Mr. Celente, Gerald, just over about a year ago or so, the Trends Research Institute alerted us to an impending economic crisis you named then the Panic of '08. Now, what was the impetus for that alert?
Well, the handwriting was on the wall. You know, the meltdown really began around July of 2007 when the financial crisis started to work its way through. They blamed it on the subprime problem, but we knew it was much bigger than that. It was really the result of lowering interest rates for 46-year lows,
right,
to inflate a real estate bubble that was ready to burst. And that was, again, only part of it, because we knew of all these other deals going on as we're seeing them come to roost now, all these leveraged buyouts, all of these deals with no money down and buying multi-billion-dollar companies. All the commercial real estate that was being bought, again, with no money down, virtually none. So it was only a matter of time, and it was a worldwide crisis, and it's not going to stop. We called it the Panic of '08 last year at this time. Now we're saying it's going to be the collapse of '09.
And you think there's more of these Madoff stories going to come to the newspapers and television in the next couple of months and years, Mr. Celente?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's only one of the criminals out there. This is the dirty dealing going on. I mean, I remember listening to all these business news shows about how they would applaud the new Gilded Age people of monumental wealth with all of these multi $100 million plus yearly salaries. The only way you make money like that is to steal it from somebody. Nobody's worth that kind of money. The only wealth that they create is for themselves. It's just the beginning.
Well, really, I look at some of the job descriptions of some of these gentlemen. They're sitting in a booth, working a black box, and signing off papers. They're not doing anything but shuffle papers, are they?
You have it. I mean, again, it's all these things they call exotic financial instruments. It's the casino. Wall Street is a casino, and the game is rigged. The game's rigged against the little people. You just look at these bailouts that are going on. It's the perfect, actually, Titanic analogy. When the Titanic was going under, and it was sinking fast, the only people that they gave the lifeboats to were the too rich to drown. And they're doing the same thing now with all these bailouts of Bear Stearns and Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs and all the rest of them that are getting hundreds of billions of dollars that are being spread around. They're all too big to fail, and the little people that are too small to save are the ones that are going down with the ship, and they're also being forced to pay for the lifeboats for the too big to fail.
Okay, please don't use bad language here. We're on the air. How do you rate the performance of Hank Paulson at the Fed? He's a Goldman Sachs boy, right,
and it's the same old crew.
Yeah.
And Obama's bringing in the retreads from the Clinton administration, who also were the ones responsible for deregulating the industry by killing the Glass-Steagall Act, the banking act that was put in place in the 1930s, and deregulating the securities industry. Larry Summers, Timothy Geithner. These are Robert Rubin boys left over from the Clinton days. Well, again, Goldman Sachs, Geithner, and not Geithner, but Geithner may be another guy they brought in. I think his name is Gersten. He's another Goldman Sachs crew. And Wall Street's hijacked Washington. It's in broad daylight, and they're robbing the people blind. As I said, we're going to go into the collapse of '09. After this Christmas season, you're going to start seeing major retailers go under. And with them, you're going to start seeing vacancies, and they're already happening. Circuit City went bankrupt, Linens and Things, Stephen Barry, Sharper Image. About 140,000 stores have closed in the last year. And who's going to fill these vacancies? The answer is nobody. Empty stores galore, plus all the financial sector that's crashing out. And that's going to leave vacancies as well in all these commercial buildings. So the commercial real estate sector is going to be the next big one to collapse, and the retail with it.
3/4 of the U.S. Gross domestic product, Gerald's predicated on Americans using that old charge card. I guess those days are history, are they?
They are history, and it's going to it's a corrupt system to begin with. That people go out and borrow money to go buy things that they probably shouldn't have had in the first place. For example, there's so much product on the market. You know, I just went out and bought a new car this June. I bought a 1994 Audi Cabriolet, you know, a nice, beautiful classic with extremely low mileage on it. And I paid the grand total of about $3,800 and put another $2,000 into it and have myself a beautiful machine, rather than going deep into debt and buying a car that, you know, with all these bells and whistles that I don't need, that's going to, you know, put a crimp in anybody's lifestyle, except if you're the very, very rich. So why do it? And it's that Yankee frugality that we're going to see a rebirth of. Use it up, wear it out, make it do without. No, this whole business of borrowing money now and paying it off in the future is coming to a very quick end.
You call it the Greatest Depression. Your words from Trends Research, this is going to be worse than the 1930s Depression. Can you give us a couple of words on that?
Yes. Back then, when we went into the Depression, most people didn't own homes. They didn't have all these mortgages and property taxes and insurance and all the upkeep. And back then, there was no such thing as a home equity loan. If you had a second mortgage, what they called them back then, you were a loser. Mm-hmm. And back then, people didn't have credit cards. They weren't $14 trillion in debt. And back then, the United States was the manufacturing powerhouse of the world. We were not incurring $700 billion worth of trade deficits each year. And we were a nation that had a budget surplus. We weren't $11.5 trillion in the hole and counting. And back then, when we did get out of the Great Depression, we did it with our manufacturing powerhouse that's now been shipped overseas to cheap labor markets. And back then, we were an ascending nation. We weren't a nation of declining on a social scale. You go to the major cities in the States, I mean, you have poverty levels that are hitting all-time highs again. But more than that, you have a very undereducated and uneducated population. You have dropout rates of high school that are above 50%. So we're not an ascending nation as we were in the 1930s.
Well, of course, back in the 30s, our grandparents actually had savings, Gerald. And, you know, we had people out there that when you went bankrupt in the 20s, you were considered a social pariah. Now it's jingle mail. People are walking away with no social consequence at all.
No, you're right. And then also the people back then were self-sustaining. Right. You know, I have a photo in one of my books. The book is called What Zizzy Gave Honey Boy. Zizzy was my aunt. And there's a picture of my parents, may they rest in peace, and their wedding of 1934. These are Italian immigrants. Right. And you should see the way they're dressed. And it's not only my photos, it's everyone's of that generation. When you look at the dignity that the people had. And now now they have the gangster look. I mean, what kind of society would elevate the lowest common denominator, the gangsters that they don't give shoelaces to or belts, and mimic their dress? Yeah. So that shows you what's going on. And what's going on, by the way, with the American economy is a much greater trend. It's the fall and decline, or the decline and fall of Empire America. Mm-hmm. And there's much more beyond the economic issue. It's what's going on in foreign policy, fighting immoral wars for false reasons, and the military stretched all over the world. So this country's going down. At one time, you look at OECD data, and the United States ranked first in education, first in quality of life, first in health care. We don't even win, place, or show in most of those fields anymore.
let's not get too scary here, but you wrote in one of your recent articles I just read about, you call it what's coming, the revolution. I was looking in the TV. We all have what's happening in Greece. Are we unfortunately going to see a lot more of that spread around the world, Gerald?
Oh, yes. I'm a Bronx boy originally, if you can't tell by the accent.
Not at all, yeah.
And, there's a saying that I have. When people lose everything and they have nothing to lose, they lose it. And this is what the white shoe boys, the Harvard, Princeton, Yale people,